The Project Tribute Foundation is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to aiding our nation's first responders. Our vision and mission is to enhance the life-saving capabilities of our first responders through raising awareness and funding for the life-saving work that they do. Our goal with the podcast is to be an educational avenue and a method for our heroes to express themselves. In the podcast, we will discuss various tough subjects. Some of the subjects may be uncomfortable or controversial. Our guests have the right to share their thoughts and ideas, and for our listeners to hear the unedited words of our guests. The Foundation's role is to showcase a diverse array of thoughts and opinions within the first responder community. If you hear something that you do not agree with, please consider reaching out to us at projecttributefoundation@gmail.com and join our podcast. If you're a first responder and you would like to share your story, we truly would love to hear from you and learn from your experiences. Please enjoy this week's show, and as always, like, comment, and share to help us grow. You can find more information at www.projecttribute.com. Thanks and have a great one. All right, guys, welcome back to John Beckloff with the Project Tribute Foundation. I have another, wonderful guest. I'm really excited about this one. A young lady from the Tulsa Police Department, and I'm going to let her do all of the introductions. But really, the focus of this one's going to be mental health. We've spoken with a lot of first responders over the past several weeks, and every single time after we hang up, it's like, man, we should have dived deeper into that. So we're going to try. Recording is always tough and awkward, and I never thought I'd be audio and video recording myself. And so this is first time for my guest as well. So first thing is just, will you introduce yourself and kind of tell us what you do and your role currently?
Yes, sir. I am a sergeant at the Tulsa Police Department. My name is Amber McCarty Dorshaw. I've been with the department for about 14 years now, and I'm currently assigned to the mental health unit as their supervisor.
And so when you say mental...
Good.
Oh, sorry. So on mental health, is it mental health for civilians or for officers or both?
Yes, both. So we do handle, as first responders, a large portion of calls involving people who are mentally ill or who are experiencing a mental health crisis. So we definitely do that, but under my umbrella also falls peer support. So we have the peer support team that operates out of my unit also.
Fantastic. Okay, sorry. Go ahead. I interrupted you.
Yeah, no, that's it. So I've had a couple different assignments over the years. My favorite one so far has been a detective in the major crimes unit. So we responded to all the major crime incidents, investigated felonious assaults, but a good bulk of our time was spent doing crime scene processing. So lots of shootings, stabbings, homicides, suicides, gnarly death scenes, but definitely probably the most rewarding part of my job, aside from what I'm doing right now, and giving back to the community and helping our first responders through our peer support program also.
Sure. So when you say most rewarding, is it the solving the crime? Is it just the meticulousness of it? Why was it the most rewarding to you?
Actually, my part, you wouldn't think, I guess, that it would be enjoyable, but we did a lot of death notifications. I worked with a lot of family members after suicide to get information and kind of put the pieces back together as to what led up to the events. And that was just something that I was really good at, communicating with them and being empathetic with them during probably the most difficult time of their life. But I just thought it was rewarding, and I thought it was cool to get to experience that with them, even though it was, emotionally challenging at times. But that's where my love for mental health grew. People don't realize that suicide is, a worldwide problem. Media doesn't cover it very often unless it's somebody who's, famous, Robin Williams or Chester Bennington, Kate Spade. But we have significantly more suicides than we do homicides all over the country. And first responders are more at risk for suicide also. So this is a topic close to my heart. And, it kind of falls under the mental health because most of them are struggling with some type of illness.
Yep. Yeah, it's when I talked with the Tulsa Metro Women on Fire, and they're also firefighters for Tulsa, that was one of the things that they spoke about is they found just spending that extra little time with somebody on a call. And I think their example was they were notifying somebody of a death, and just learning their story meant that was one of their I don't know, favorite shifts, not the right word, but that was a memory that they really took to, because they were able to take the time and show the compassion. And so that makes sense on your end. As you know, as a detective, you're able to give that time and really be the face of the department on, I mean, truly somebody's worst day.
Right.
If you're speaking with a detective, there's no recovery for the most part. This is a loss occurred. So that's powerful. So, I mean, with the things that you see, I mean, you dealt with a lot of trauma yourself, just as a human, having to go and deal with the crimes. Did peer support, as when you were a detective, did that exist whenever you were doing it?
No, actually, it didn't. It came after the fact. And, you know, my experience in law enforcement was basically none before I joined this profession. So there's nobody else in my family. Actually have an old cold case, my grandfather, who I never met because he was murdered before I was born. So that kind of always sparked my interest. But I can remember, you know, I hadn't really seen a dead body until I was in the academy. We were in our traffic training. So they actually had a traffic fatality. So they took us all to the scene, and, you know, it was pretty minor as far as the gruesome level went. So when I went into crime scene, I'd had, you know, a couple different homicide and suicide scenes that I'd worked, but you know, you just kind of get used to it, and not necessarily callous about it, but there were times when I didn't want to be alone with a dead body in a house. And then it was like, okay, in a room, I don't want to be alone in a room. And then it was like, I don't care. And then it was like, okay, I can't look at crime scene videos while I'm eating, you know? So it's just, you get used to it after a while, and not that it doesn't bother you, but it's just part of the job. And, you know, you kind of get more comfortable with being around death and the gruesomeness. It doesn't mean it doesn't affect you, but I was a lucky one that, you know, I never had nightmares pertaining to my crime scenes. There are people that do, and thank God I never did. So, you know, some of them are a lot more challenging than others. And also, you know, depending on the circumstances in someone's life, we have officers that have young kids at home. So if they're then tasked with working a scene involving a young kid, it just tears them up inside, you know. So it just kind of depends on the individual altogether.
Well, I spoke with two firefighters out of Lawrence, Kansas on Wednesday, and Lawrence, Kansas had two of their leadership take their own lives. And unfortunately, that is what then sparked them to try to be better. And so that's the big goal is, if you're hearing this and you're considering it, do it before you need to, or do it before you go, damn it, I wish we would have.
Right.
And so what they did is they then were behind the eight ball on it. And what they were talking through is that if a critical incident happens, they go and have this series of conversations. And they talked about that if you know that a father just had to deal with a child call, they're going to go check in that day, and then they're going to check in a couple days later. And is that, I mean, I'm assuming that is the protocol of peer support. Is that kind of what you see as well?
Yeah, so we have a couple different resources here within Tulsa, and our peer support program also was sparked from a tragedy. The last line of duty suicide that we had was in 2016, and we started immediately meeting after the fact, and this program was created out of that tragedy. So we did have the critical incident response team, and that's the unit that would typically respond to an officer-involved shooting or a super gruesome scene where we could tell an officer was struggling with the aftermath. And that was strictly work-related. And our peer support programs just kind of opened up to anything, because first responders struggle with marital problems revolving around shift work and missing holidays and birthdays and tragedies that pop up all the time or pull them away from their loved ones. So really, peer support's basically for anyone. If we know that somebody had a death in the family or struggled with an illness or was diagnosed with cancer or something, we'll reach out to them, and then they can always reach out or refer to us also. So it's not strictly work related, it's basically anything. And, you know, we can understand the struggles that first responders face. And, provide a listening ear, listen for, some red flags, maybe if they need referral to different resources within the community or professionals that can help them throughout their problems. So.
Well, and so prior, you and I kind of talked and just setting this up, and the firefighters were saying that through the IAFF, basically the firefighter union, there is a facility, not in Oklahoma, but somewhere else, that the only thing that has to be covered by the department was the flight to get there. And you had shared that either Tulsa or I think the police union, but somehow on the police side of it, there was the same thing where it was a facility dedicated to police. That way you're not sitting there next to somebody that you may have arrested a couple weeks ago for the same thing. I mean, you're sitting there with other officers. I mean, Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, there are loads of resources that we benefit from here in Tulsa, but others that could be, expanded out to the rest of the community and the rest of the state for first responders. But the city of Tulsa has had free psychological services through a contractor for decades. They've done that since the late 80s, I believe. So it was just police and fire, but now they've included our dispatchers. Believe it or not, they struggle with PTSD from time to time also. So any of our employees can go to specifically trauma-trained therapists through first responder support services. They're the ones that have the contract right now. So we promote that. We encourage people to do that from day one in the academy. Things have changed significantly since I came on the department in 2007, but we are putting more of a priority over maintaining someone's mental health and kind of keeping yourself where you need to be. So when a horrible crime scene happens or a critical incident happens, you're more able to handle that effectively if you're already doing okay. If you're doing bad and then something bad happens, it's just going to be worse. So we have the free psychological services. We have the peer support team. There's a facility called Oakwood Springs, and it's in Oklahoma City. They have a veterans and first responders wing. So that is for first responders only. So they will go to an out-of-town facility for mental health treatment or for substance use treatment. And kind of be separated from the general population. We also have a facility that we've worked with in Florida, Transformations, that specializes in substance use, and they have a specific area for first responders also. But I think you were referring to Mighty Oaks, and that is a faith-based program that really has been well received within the Tulsa Police Department. I think we've had probably over 75 officers attend. And it is faith-based, but it's essentially like a post-traumatic workshop where officers go and they're either with only other officers or only other first responders or veterans and firefighters that are kind of all in this mix together, struggling with some of the same issues. But it's really phenomenal. It is faith-based. It's mightyoaks.com, I think, or org. I'm not sure which one. But Chad Robichaux is the founder, and he was a former police officer in Louisiana and also a veteran, and a very successful MMA fighter, has lots of accolades, but really struggled with post-traumatic stress after all that, and was about to lose his life and lose his marriage, and has recovered and now started this amazing foundation and is helping people throughout the country. So it's phenomenal.
Yeah, it really is an epidemic of first responders taking their lives through the trauma that they see in their day to day, and I've had the conversation I don't know how many times at this point, and I've seen it. We were doing a news story, one of the first a year ago when we started, and we had Channel 6, and one of the guys went on a call for their town, one of the guys went on their call for their town, and they came back and they were ready to do the interview as if nothing ever happened, and I talk about this frequently, that you don't know if they just lost the person that they went to help, or as far as I'm concerned, they went to pick up some balloons and came right back. I mean, it was nothing to them, because first responders are great at turning that switch on and off until that switch breaks. And then when that switch breaks, it's way too late. And what I've heard from a lot of the ones doing the peer support it relies on communication. It relies on those daily door to doors, or just at the coffee table at the firehouse, saying, just talking about life, but listening, truly listening for, ooh, that's a red flag right there. Or, hey man, usually you talk about your kids, today or not, are you okay? I mean, it's just those little changes because you've invested the time with your folks. So, I want to make sure that I get this question in, but one of the things I always ask first responders, and I want to just keep this with every guest we bring on, it is tough on the civilian side to speak to first responders, especially if you all are in uniform by your cars at the parade, whatever, and just to say thank you. And it's terrifying because I don't feel that I deserve to be around you, for lack of a better term. I mean, you guys, I respect what you do to that point where it's like, ooh, I'm not worthy. So in your career, is there time that somebody has come up to you and said thank you that you really found memorable, or is there just in general, what is your preferred way of somebody to show their appreciation to you or to your officers out in the field?
Yeah, I think anytime we hear the thank yous, it's appreciated. Now whether or not we have the time to stop and talk to you is a different story, but it's always nice to hear that. I was actually waiting in line to get my allergy shots at the doctor this morning, and a gentleman was leaving, walking out the door, and said, "Hey, I just want to thank you for what you're doing." And that was right before I started my shift. So I'm like, cool. We don't hear it from the media. The media indicates that people hate our guts and they don't appreciate what we do or what we give up to serve the communities that we do. But that's not true. We hear from people day in and day out, people trying to buy us our meals and just being polite and professional and thanking us for what we do. So it happens a lot. It happens quite frequently in Tulsa, probably depending on where you work, what area you work, or what shift you work. But on day shift, we hear it all the time.
Right.
So I don't want anybody to think that they're unworthy and they can't say, "Hey, thank you." Now it might just be a quick interaction. I might not have time to stop and talk to anyone or to most people, but it's always appreciated when somebody does that.
Well, and I think that if you're listening to this, Tulsa has, especially in the policing department, from national news, the national news is going to make Tulsa police officers look like the LA County Sheriff's Office. I mean, these hardened cops that don't care about the citizenry, when really it's just the normal cop that you would see in small town Oklahoma. I mean, unfortunately, Tulsa has had some brutal moments in history against minority of the community, but that's not indicative of Tulsa police. That's not indicative of, I mean, really, Tulsa's done a great job of shifting that over the years, and every department has room for improvement. But I think that the general viewer doesn't understand what the national news portrays Tulsa police as because of the Tulsa race riots and other things, right, when in reality, that's not the case. I mean, if you're from Tulsa and you're serving in Tulsa, Tulsa's your home and you're treating it like this is my neighbor. Tulsa's a great department. I've spent a lot of time around several officers with Tulsa, and you guys do a great job.
Thank you.
So on the flip side, what don't you want? Kind of the age-old war story of, tell me, have you ever killed someone? What is something you don't want the general populace or other people to come up and bring up without? It makes sense if I'm going into the field, but if I'm not going to the field and I'm asking you questions, what do you not want me to bring up?
I think probably one of the biggest things that most people in my profession will tell you, it wouldn't be uncommon for us to walk into a public setting and a parent to say, "Oh, you better be good. That officer's going to get you." We don't want kids afraid of us. We want them to come to us if there's a problem. And so I sometimes will smart off and say, "No, I don't arrest kids. I arrest their parents," and move on, and just kind of be like, "Come on, man, what are you doing? Don't get your kid afraid of me. Don't use me as your punishment tool." But aside from it, and that's, it seems harmless on their side and they're probably not even thinking about it, but kids believe what their parents tell them. So we want them to come to us when they have problems or when they're scared or they need help. So that's a big one. But also, when there's a big incident that happens, a big critical incident that's involved a high profile case or something, It's not uncommon for people to just stop us and ask us questions about it all the time. I may have no knowledge of that whatsoever, other than what I've seen on the news. Just because I work for Tulsa doesn't mean I know that. But I could be the officer involved in that. And every time somebody comes to talk to me about it or brings it up, they're bringing up the trauma that happened, that I don't necessarily want to think about 24/7. So I would just kind of be wise, and treat an officer or anybody that you interact with in the public as you would a family member or a friend. And you're not wanting up to bring bad memories to their, forefront, to their thought every time you interact with them. So people are pretty nosy,
Yeah. Well, and I want to dive into this a little bit more, because one of the things that I've noticed is, as I've talked with officers, or I've had the privilege and honor of sitting on officer review panels and that kind of stuff, and the questions tend to lead towards tell me about situations and how you handled it, and every time officers will tell you the exact time, the exact call number, the exact intersection, the azimuth of the moon of that call that stood out to them. I mean, everything about that moment. I mean, it's as if they go back to it and relive it as they're verbalizing it to you. And that was off of basic questions of like, tell us about a time where you had to use your command voice. I mean, it wasn't any question that should take somebody back to the past, but man, they really dive deep.
Yeah.
And I don't think the populace understands that. I mean, do you mind kind of sharing, if somebody asks a tough question, mentally, what's going through your head? And I mean, are you reliving it what level are you reliving it? I mean, how bad is it?
So I'll briefly tell you about an incident that occurred when I was a rookie. Actually, I'd been on my own. Recently out of the academy and field training, and on my own for about 2 weeks, and was the primary officer responding to a very gruesome infant death. And, it got national news. It was kind of a freak accident. It was essentially a dog mewling, and due to neglect in the home, essentially, a dog was able to do stuff and ultimately took this infant's life. PETA was involved. They had to euthanize the dog to get the contents of its stomach. And I mean, it was just gruesome. Hopefully that's not too much for your audience, but
no, they need to hear it.
Yeah. So it made national news. I mean, every news outlet was out there and right in the middle of the forefront. So it was a sunny day. I had glasses on and I was glad because tears were streaming down my face. But it's normal for that kind of stuff to bother anyone, right? And if it doesn't bother you, then there's something wrong. So we're human. We have those emotions. We have those feelings. Our job would be a lot easier if we didn't, and we could just fight through them like RoboCop, like some people think that we are.
Right.
But CNN picked up the story. I mean, it was all over the place. And, that doesn't just air once. It goes on for weeks. But as new developments come up, they're talking about the story in some capacity almost every day for a couple of weeks. But everywhere I went, people brought that up. I mean, from people that I know, family members, from, the lady handing my drink at Sonic, everybody and their dog was asking about it. And I finally got to a point where I was like, I don't want to talk about it to people at work, to people at home. Like, I need to move on in some capacity. I can't think about this 24/7 because it was having a negative impact. And I did go get help. I went and talked to our therapist, and I was really, really appreciative for that service. And so we encourage anybody after something like that to go talk to people who can actually help you, and not just the people who are asking you questions about it. People tend to self-medicate in this profession, and that's not the way to go either. So, we really want to be there for each other, and peer support is a great way for us to, one, you've got to know the resources that you have to offer your community, to offer your officers or your firefighters, your first responders, to know what resources you have. So when they come to you with problems, you can give them a listening ear. 9 times out of 10, that's all they need. They just need somebody to listen to that can understand. But if it gets to a point where they need some type of intervention, or they need, professional help, then you're aware of where to send them, and send them to good places, not some place that doesn't have anything to do with first responders. Not every counselor is going to be able to handle the stories that we have to talk about. So,
right. So what prompted you? Because I'm assuming peer-to-peer didn't exist or peer support didn't exist whenever that happened in your realm. Is
Right.
that, I mean, so what got you to the point of going and seeking help? Did somebody tell you to? Was it just that bad, or is that just your personality of now I need to talk?
Yeah, actually, now I would just go because, but as a rookie, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to handle it. They did give me a couple days off work because it was considered a critical incident. So um, the other professionals that responded, the EMSA employees and the firefighters, were sent home for the day. I had, 8 hours of investigation to do to assist with the detectives and finish up my paperwork and my reports and getting witness statements and all that. So they actually gave me a couple days off when I returned to work from my weekend. But the department's therapist called me to check in on me, which is phenomenal. Anytime they know that officers have been involved in an incident like that, they reach out to them and just make it easier. I don't have to do anything. We don't have to do anything. They'll call us after a big known incident. Now, we don't always know what's going to bother an officer or what incident,
Right. I mean, that one's pretty
critical to them. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah. So I was really thankful for that because I don't know that I would have made an appointment, if that wasn't the incident. But it all worked out. And, I was able to go into crime scene after that and help other officers through situations now in the capacity that I can. So I'm a member of the critical incident response team. I'm on the peer support team, and we do whatever we can to help it because it's not an easy profession, and there's not a whole lot of people that understand what we do. Right. But there are people out there that care, like you, and different friends that we have. We'll just call you friends that are supporting us in whatever way possible.
Yeah, I mean, I think that 2020 was a tough year in law enforcement. I mean, that's kind of how I got started, was that in my day job, we had to call police officers, and the protests were happening. And in Bartlesville, they were very peaceful, but we still had the National Guard here and all that. And I happened to ask one of the officers, "Hey, do you need anything?" And he's like, "Yeah, we don't have any way to transport water for the folks that are walking in the crowd." And it was a very, very hot day. So great. So I went and bought all the camelbacks that we had in town and handed them out to the department. I was like, "Hey, how long are you guys going to be here?" "Oh, about 8 hours." "What are you guys doing for food?" "We don't have anything." Okay. So then I went and got food situated for them for breakfast or for lunch and dinner. And then it just kind of that activity on my part of seeing, man, they need more than I realized. And Bartlesville's a wealthy community. We're not struggling, and Tulsa's kind of the same thing, but there's still needs. And that was surprising to me. They were so focused on let's help the community that they couldn't focus on what do we need just to have a successful day and be comfortable. Water, food. I mean, basics of life. And then same thing. When I went out to the net where the National Guard guys were staged, I was like, "Hey, do you guys have water out here?" "No, we screwed up with that one." It's like, "All right, let's get you taken care of." And so then, but what's great about it is then the Tulsa Veterans Day Parade, several of the reservists that were in Bartlesville saw my Jeep and saw me, and they came up and like, "Hey, you gave me a challenge coin. That was cool. And you gave us water." I'm like, "Yeah." And then, I asked the same, "You guys, you good for right now? Actually, you got any water on you?" And it was just, to me, what people don't understand is you all are just people. Mm-hmm. That's it. I mean, I couldn't imagine having to take that call. It's somebody, they joke all the time, "John, you should look at being a cop." I don't have the emotional capability. I have too much empathy that I think that would destroy me. I mean, the fact of something happened to a friend of mine, and when I retell that story, I start crying. I don't think I have the fortitude to be able to see a dead body and to do those things. But I definitely, knowing that, I get it more on how that can impact you all. If so, peer support, if that phone call, if that therapist didn't reach out to you, how bad could things have gotten? I mean, how did that save your life, do you think?
Well, I don't know about
could
that.
It have?
Yeah. I think it made a good impact immediately. He reaffirmed that I was doing okay. I was hung up on the fact that I wanted somebody to pay for what happened to that baby. And, that's one thing that we see all these horrible things. And then sometimes people get off on technicalities or, because of their age or a juvenile. Right. Mom was a juvenile. She got 1 year probation. and she went to jail for a week when she failed a drug test. And so,
well, and that's kind of the McGirt ruling plays into this a lot now as well.
Yeah. So that's one thing that I go over with our early officers or young officers in the academy early on in their career. We don't have control over what happens in this case. We have the initial part of the investigation, and then we pass it on to the DA's office. And what happens from there, we have very little control over. Now, we can go to court and testify, but if they get off on a technicality or witnesses don't show up, we want somebody to pay for what happened. We want, the victim to be vindicated. And that doesn't always happen. And we can get wrapped up in things that we don't control. And, it can really eat at us. So, we just got to stick to do the best job that we can and what we can for that person that we're interacting with at that time, the loved ones left behind, or the other, the civilians responding. When we're responding to a traffic collision, we just got to do the best at what we can and what we have to work with, and not try to take on so much, because we're not Wonder Woman or Superman. We're humans, and we can't fix everything. We can't go after, the people that have done this. We've got to trust the system to do that, and it fails, and we're upset, and the victims' family members are upset, but it is what it is, and we just got to let that part go and just realize that we have very little control ultimately over what happens in the situation. We could just work the case as best we can and move on to the next one, unfortunately.
Yeah. That's, one of the things that the Lawrence firefighters, they were talking that the recent recruits through their, the training, there's a technical term, academy, there you go, that they brought in for the first time the peer support, and they talked to the recruits at the first of class, and then they did it recently at the last week of right before they graduated, and talked about peer support. In Tulsa, what do you guys do? At what point does an officer learn that your department exists and peer support exists?
Yeah, we do talk about it in the academy, and we actually have emotional survival day where that's what they get all day long. And actually that evening is kind of like a panel of officers and their spouses, and then the family comes in and talks to them about different things, and we let the family know of what resources are available, because our family members can go to counseling also. So it's good to let them know about it. But they are pumped with so much information in the academy that if we don't remind them at some point later on down the line. So we do in our annual in-service, we remind them, we get our peer team, which is, here in Tulsa, about 70 members. We get them to spread the word and remind people, and talk to squad meetings if you can, about what resources are available, and just remind people. Sometimes they, it goes in one ear and out the other if it's not something that they need right now, or they think, I don't need that. Well, when the time comes and you need that information, you want it readily available. So it needs to be accessible.
So, it came up when I was talking with the Lawrence guys, that you can't measure success in the peer support stuff because the whole idea is it's confidential.
Right.
How if you're trying to share a small town leadership, city council, small community, there may be a cost associated with this, but you can't give them a success rate. How do you quantify the value of it?
Yeah, I will tell you that since we've started our peer support team, and our team is encouraging officers and their family members to go get counseling when needed, that has increased dramatically since 2017. So our therapist is busier.
Right.
She's hiring more therapists. They've got 5 full-time people, and they're not only taking care of Tulsa. They've got OWASO contracts and Claremore also, surrounding agencies. But you're absolutely right. The success of your team can't necessarily be measured by statistics, because nobody wants to report that, right? So we want to remain anonymous. Right. We want confidentiality to be a priority. So you won't know how many people. But when we have each other looking at our neighbors and making sure that they're okay, and taking care of each other, watching their emotional six, and not just their back on calls, but when we're truly taking care of each other like a family, then it's going to run more effectively. And, that means knowing your brother on the left and on the right, and what's the norm for them, and at least how to get them help or where to refer them to help. If you're not a member of the team, you know, refer somebody who is a member. I've had people just call me and say, hey, can you reach out to this person? I think they're struggling. Sure, no problem. People call us all the time. I'm never going to report back to them, hey, by the way, I talked to Joey. Joey says X, Y, and Z, but it's not his business. He just needs to know that I'm going to handle it, and I handle it. So,
yep. So what, I mean, I asked the last guys too, and one of them struggled to answer it. How do you take care of yourself? I mean, do you have a peer that you call when, man, I'm struggling? I mean, how do you decompress? Because if you're the top of the pyramid, you got to watch yourself.
We teach officer wellness in our CIT. We've actually added it to the CIT curriculum. So we're big on maintaining your mental health. Like, don't get so far down that you're struggling. You know, your mental health, your brain affects everything that you do. What you eat matters, what you drink matters, the amount of sleep you're getting. And they'll tell you right after a critical incident, the best thing you can do for yourself is go do a light workout, get those endorphins going, get the chemicals balanced in your body. We don't want you to remain way on high alert, you know, for an extended period of time. You know, there's things that we can do. I rely heavily on my faith. God has sustained me. I believe that this is a calling, that he's given me the grace to do this job and to do it well. But when I do struggle, I go to God and, you know, I pray, I meditate, I do whatever I can to maintain my mental health, to decompress and relax. Big on working out and trying to eat healthy. Dang it. Why does bad food taste so good? But why does Jameson taste so good?
Yeah.
You know,
that's funny.
It's, you know, we're humans, you know, we have a bad day. You want to go grab a beer or something, you know, sometimes it's better to just go run a couple miles and burn off that steam, you know, and you can have a beer, you know, lay off the 6-packs, lay off the 12-packs, but you can have a beer.
Right. Yeah. If you see me running, you need to be concerned, really concerned. I'm not doing that.
I don't love it, John.
Yeah. One of the things that the foundation, we were fortunate that actually yesterday we signed the lease for a 1,400 square foot office that's being donated to us. And we were looking at one of the spaces that it's basically a single room about the size of a bedroom. And it was, well, what do we do with this? And one of the board members threw out the idea, why don't we make that a peer support room, where local first responders, they can meet with somebody here. That way it's not in public. It's not at their department. It's completely confidential. We're off from the main road. That way, I mean, you can't even easily drive by to see somebody's there.
Yeah.
It's a phenomenal idea, but what if you were to design your perfect space for a first responder to have a peer support room? I mean, I'm picturing cigar bar type chairs, just like a comfortable place to sit. You know, what would you do? How would you develop a single room for, you know, that kind of a peer support?
Yeah, man.
I know I didn't prep
it looked a lot like a firehouse with some lazy boys, you know. Just kidding.
Okay. I mean, but
we don't have a space. We meet people where they are. You know, if that means I'm going to go have coffee with them or go have a meal with them or just partner up car to car, maybe a phone conversation, just whatever. We don't actually have a space. But
do you think that is there value in that, or do you think that won't be used?
You know, in a location or an agency as big as Tulsa, it'd be really hard to get some kind of secluded place that nobody, I mean, everybody would have to know, and then everybody would know where's that. But, you know, I think it's pretty easy. I think that's a great idea because, you know, you want people to have a space to go to if there's, you know, some intense conversations that need to happen. But I don't know. I picture like Jack Johnson in the background playing, you know, maybe some lava lamps. I don't know.
To me, it was just comfortable chairs, snacks, coffee, water, just a space a hangout.
Almost basically. Like a break room. Yeah.
And that's kind of what I was thinking. If they don't use, at least we can say, hey, we're doing all we can. I hope it gets used.
I think that's
actually flip side. I hope somebody doesn't need it, but I want to be available if they do. Right. And that's the heart. Bartlesville is a small town. And so you can't go to Chili's and not see 19 different people and have 5 other people around you going, man, that was a tough call, and they know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of my thing of, instead of going to the hole in the wall bar here in town or some bar elsewhere, come have a cup of coffee, water, snack in a safe space where basically we'll hand you the key, say, let me know when I need to come back and lock it up.
Nice.
So
I think that's great.
That's kind of our thought. Okay. So, I mean, you see value in that from your side?
Absolutely. A safe place to land, or to have a tough conversation where there's no listening ears in the background, or, distractions, where they can just be real and get whatever advice or vent as much as they need to.
Yep. All right. Well, cool. So one of the things, and this is the toughest question, so I'm going to pair them together to try to simplify it. It's about, what are you proud of and why do you do what you do? And so they can kind of be paired, or if there is something you're proud of, but it's hard to get officers and first responders to say what they're proud of, because they're like, this is me. I just do it. But what makes you show up every day?
The population that we serve in the mental health unit, specifically individuals struggling with mental illness, are often kind of the outcast of society. People are afraid of them. The mental illness, there's a stigma behind that. People get treated differently. They're super hypersensitive, so being able to help someone who, and this is what most first responders would say, right? We're here to help whoever it is. This just happens to be the population that society doesn't really know what to do with all the time. They end up on the streets. They end up with substance use problems. They're unable to cope. They're unable to function in society like the rest of us can. I get really, really appreciative of my girls. As a supervisor, I don't get to spend a lot of one-on-one time with the citizens that we serve, but the girls in our community response team that are taking these mental health calls day in and day out, struggling, to find resources within the community to help certain members, they're doing great work for somebody that can never repay them for what we're doing, right? And so being able to help someone who's truly a victim of, anything, but this is their life. This is what they're doing. They're never going to get better. There's not, there are pills sometimes that help, but they even struggle with that and the complexities of trying to medicate when they're living on the streets, or they don't have insurance, or they don't have a job, or they don't have anybody to disperse the meds to them. This is a population that a lot of people have turned their back on. And so I'm grateful for my unit, and that they can find meaningful work and find purpose in helping somebody who it seems as if society has turned their back on.
Yeah, I mean, in Oklahoma, there is not any worthwhile facility. I mean, we have lots of small places, but we have defunded mental health. I mean, flat out. And then we've put it on the backs of our first responders, the police, the fire, the EMS. And it's, man, unless you say these things, I can't take you anywhere. You haven't committed a crime. You're pissing them off. But other than that, there's nothing I can do.
Yeah.
I mean, in my day job, there was a student that it was fascinating to watch how intelligent he was, and he was in crisis, and somebody kept shushing him. So finally, out of anger, he responds back, "Do you really think shushing me is going to make me feel better about myself?" And it was just like, man, spot on. And I just kept on walking, because it really was like, they're not stupid.
Right.
They're just, you gotta work differently. That's it. Like they're wired a little different, and some need help that doesn't exist. And so that's the thing that people don't understand, is that if you see somebody talking themselves on a street corner and you call, an officer's going to show up that may or may not have the mental health training. And so that's fantastic that Tulsa has that. And just, I'd like to kind of dive a little bit better when you're talking mental health. I mean, it's anything from somebody calls in on somebody talking to themselves, acting strange, to I'm assuming the guy that's threatening suicide on the overpass, is one of your team going to both of those, or I mean,
Yeah.
what are kind of the standard calls?
Yeah, part of my assignment is training also. So we do academy training, a little bit of that. We do crisis intervention team training, which is where I met your friend. So 40 hours of intense mental health training, going from, you know, this is bringing people struggling with mental illness or who are in recovery, who are functioning well and on their meds, and giving their story, family members whose loved ones suffer from mental illness. So, and then lectures on mental illness and what signs and symptoms to look for, communication, how to interact with them, suicide class on suicide prevention, de-escalation, communication, and then officer wellness. We do a lot of intense training in this. So then on top of that, we do yearly in-service training for mental health. So this year in TPD, or at TPD, I should say, we're doing 1 hour in trauma-informed policing, and then followed by resiliency, just to end on a high note, right? We don't want to talk trauma without shedding some light at the end of the tunnel. So I do a lot of training for not only TPD, but also the state of Oklahoma's crisis intervention team. And so we essentially teach people how to interact with individuals who are mentally ill more effectively. And so mental health is different than mental illness. Mental health, everybody has, right? Just like physical health. So if I'm mentally healthy, then I'm okay. If I'm struggling from a mental illness, then it's a completely different picture. So, you know, our goal is to teach officers how to maintain their mental health and avoid, you know, some of the pitfalls that are common to this profession. The population we serve are typically struggling with a serious mental illness, and they are not maintaining their mental health. They're on the extreme opposite end of this.
Right.
So there are resources that again, it all goes back to resources, right? If I know that you have a problem and I don't know what's around to help you, then how am I going to give you the help that you need? You're just going to call me back tomorrow or 2 weeks from now with the same problem over and over again. So you have to be aware of what's available to the community that you serve and what resources are available, because I don't provide treatment. I respond to 911 calls, or I instruct others how to do that. But yeah, our girls respond to anything and everything. And what's tricky about the call is that when somebody's in crisis, they're not always communicating effectively. And that goes to anybody, not just people struggling with a serious mental illness. So most of the time when we're getting a call on somebody who's mentally ill, it's a passerby or a witness, an individual that's saying, hey, this is going on. I don't know what's going on with him, or a family member because of the disturbance. Right. But if it's an individual who's calling and they're the ones in crisis, they may be hallucinating and seeing things that aren't there. They're calling in a disturbance. When we get there, there's nobody there. There's no burglary, you know, there's people, nobody in their attic. So we don't always know what we get. They say that an average of 1 in 10 calls nationwide is a mental health call, a mental illness call. But there's really no way to quantify that, because we show up on calls all the time and we don't know exactly what we got until we get there. So unless it's categorized when we leave the scene correctly, and usually it's not on the front end, it's, you know, it's a disturbance. We get there, no, this person's in need of mental health treatment. We're going to take them into custody because they're a threat to themselves or others, and we're moving on about our business. But you don't know. I mean, it could be the jumper that's you know, climbed up the highway sign and they're wanting to jump down. It could be somebody who's struggling, who's with it enough to call 911 and convey that information. It could be somebody shadow boxing on the side of the road that people are just alarmed or afraid of, you know. So anything and everything. We got a lot of frequent flyers, frequent callers. So we're familiar, our team's familiar with people. So if we hear an address or we hear a name, we know automatically, oh, I need to go there. Our officers know, hey, can you start me the community response team to help out? But we also have CIT officers trained in the field to handle that. So we really promote mental health training in Tulsa because, you know, Everybody's in crisis. Most people are in crisis that we're dealing with, whether they're mentally ill or not. They're in some type of crisis, or we wouldn't be involved. So,
yeah, I mean, it's fascinating to me that some communities are believing the rhetoric that you don't need police officers, you just need therapists, whereas police officers can be just as effective with, mental health training.
yeah,
But it also has therapists can't do as much as a police officer if you don't have a place to provide services after the fact. No
right.
different than if you don't have a jail, you can't arrest somebody if you don't have a place to take them. You can't treat somebody for their mental illness if you don't have a place to take them.
Yeah.
So we keep talking about the front end, but we don't do anything on the back end. So that's fascinating. So one of the things that as I get, female first responders are, not a rarity, but not as common. And so when I talk to the female firefighters, female firefighters, there's not as many, right? But in the policing world, do you feel like being a woman has made you more effective, less effective? Just depends on the circumstances. What's your stance on, kind of your role as a leader and a female leader? And sound because is your whole team women as well, or is it
Yes.
diverse?
Yeah, we actually are, not by choice. It's just the way it's happened so far. So
Sure.
it is not uncommon in the mental health world to be predominantly female. So we
Right.
just happen to be in mental health and on the police department. So right now we have loads and loads of officers on our peer support team that are male. I just
Sure.
don't have any within the mental health unit, and loads of
Sierra
officers that are male also.
Yeah, I mean, Sierra was talking through that she found it as an officer that if she was showing up and it was an irate male, they responded better to her than one of her male partners, and vice versa. If it was a female, that female would respond for the most part better to her male counterparts. Do you feel like because of you being, your team being, female, that when you're approaching somebody, it's not as confrontational, or do you think it's just dependent on your approach?
Yeah,
Doesn't matter, I guess.
Approach definitely, but it also depends on the other individual, right? There are people
Right.
who have traumas associated with males or associated with females, and they're more likely to communicate more effectively with the opposite. So it can depend on the individual. But that doesn't surprise me that Sierra would see that. And I've really never thought about it. Yeah, there have been plenty of times where I would show up thinking, okay, I'm going to work my verbal judo magic. And
Right.
For whatever reason, this person who's mentally ill wants absolutely nothing to do with me. She's going to talk to the rookie officer male that she thinks is cute or whatever,
Sure, but
you never know. But she, yeah, I can think of one incident where we got a call right out of squad meeting right after I promoted, and I was still on midnights as a new sergeant. And he said, "Okay, Mom, you get to show us how it goes. Let's go." It's not my kid, but they called me Mom. So,
Sure.
so I show up. I'm like, "Okay, I'll show you how to talk to somebody who's mentally ill. Let's do this." And she started cussing at me immediately. "I want nothing to do with you. I want to talk to him." And so I'm just like coaching him in the background, trying to stay away because I was a trigger for her for some reason. So you never know what's going to happen. But that's part of the mental health game. So we'll do whatever we can and jump through whatever hoops we have to provide a solid service to that civilian. But yeah, we don't know what's going to trigger someone. So if I can effectively communicate with somebody better than the next guy, then we're just going to roll with it,
So you're not there just to arrest people and bust skulls in. That's what I'm hearing. Like, oh my God.
Well, that is the fun part, but no, that's not what we're doing here.
And that I don't think people understand that at the end of the day, you all are just trying to figure out what's the problem and how do we solve this problem, and that's it. Sometimes the problem does mean you need a long adult timeout. Sometimes the problem is, can you please just leave, quit fighting, stop drinking, but I don't think people understand that when you all are showing up on scene, it really is, why am I here? How do we make it where I'm not coming back? I mean, it's not that big of a deal. One of the questions that I am curious about, looking back, is there anything now that if you could go back and tell you when you were starting or going through the academy, is there anything you wish somebody would have told you back then, and something that new recruits need to know?
Yeah. So I think all that knowledge, you know, a little bit of that wisdom comes from just the time on. So if I could talk to rookie Amber and say, you know, a couple words of advice, it would be that that you're human, you know, and it's okay. Stuff's going to bother you. You can work through it, and that, you know, it is a very rewarding career. It's very challenging. There's nothing about being a first responder that's easy, but we have so much support. We have so many resources that are devoted to us, like yourself and the TPD Foundation, and loads of friends throughout, you know, the community that are thanking us on a regular basis. Not to believe the hype, what the media says. They're trying to divide us in the community that we serve, and it's not factual. You know, it's a good story that's selling and apparently making them money. But the truth is, we have so many people that support us and appreciate what we do. That I can't fix Tulsa. You know, even if we had 2,000 more officers, we can't fix Tulsa. There's always going to be crime. It's, you know, it apparently just goes along with our society, but, you know, it's rewarding. You know, it's been a challenge, 14 years, but there's not another thing I could think of that would be as rewarding as what I'm doing right now, even in an admin assignment like I have. It's not as cool as the field. I will always miss the field. Maybe go back one day, but just that, you know, like obviously there's some scenes that are going to bother you. There's some cases that you're going to die with, you know, but we're making a difference, and we're positively impacting the communities that we serve.
Yeah. So is there anything, I mean, on the foundation side, we're in our first year, and one of the things that I'm committed to is that 100% of our donations go back out to first responders. So in our first year, we earned $14,000. We put $24,000 worth of stuff back into the field. But I mean, Tulsa's kind of unique. You guys have an amazing foundation, and those guys rock it out.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you see that the foundation can do to further aid our first responders? I mean, how can Project Tribute help overall first responders from your perspective?
Yeah. Maybe it would be just finding out what resources are available for the communities that you serve, to educate them on what's available. I don't know if that means highlight different agencies that provide services, mental health services, or you know, there's so many different benefits offered to first responders. That's part of the challenge. Is when I go to Bartlesville and teach CIT, I don't know what resources are available in Bartlesville. I'm, you know, expert in what Tulsa has and Tulsa serves, but maybe
so we need to somehow make a quick database per community of here's what you have available to you.
Yeah.
So where if somebody's looking, man, okay, this is it.
Yeah, and actually the Oklahoma Department of Mental Health could probably add to your list too on what counselors have been vetted for first responders, or a list there. But I think the biggest thing that is a plus in Tulsa is that we have the ability to go to free counseling services, us and our immediate family. So my husband could go, his kids could go. Because it's not easy for them to be involved in this world too, right? The kids had no say in it, and you know they're really hearing a bunch of negative things from the media, and kids are repeating things they hear that aren't true. And so sometimes, depending on different situations that happen in Tulsa, you know, if I was involved in a critical incident, they would feel the after fact. They would feel the aftermath of that. And so be able to talk to your kids about that, but also what resources are available, not only for your first responders that you're serving, but for the family members that are affected by it also.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the two big goals that I've got for the foundation is eventually to earn enough income where we can have our own therapist on hand. I mean, that, and it's lofty. I want to be able to pay I'd like to take somebody like you that's done it in the field and then get them trained, properly certified. That way a first responder has a first responder on the team that they can call. And so that's a big goal of ours. The other side of it is just to help grow the foundation for marketing and design. But we're taking even down to our challenge coins, the ones coming in, have the suicide hotline on the edge of the coin.
Yeah.
That way, as we hand these out, we're getting more resources out to our first responders.
Yeah, that's great.
And so the final question that I've got is when we reached out and kind of communicated, and you started mentally preparing to get on this podcast because no one likes doing this, but you said, okay, before we hang up, I need to make sure I've said XYZ. Is there anything that you wanted to make sure that you spoke about before we were done with? Any like, oh man, I need to make sure I talk about such and such. We've hit quite a bunch of big topics. So
yeah, we have. I don't think so. I think we covered everything that I thought we would, and more, much more, which is great. Okay, I take that back. Yes, there is something. The work that we do as first responders, the trauma that we're exposed to day in and day out, has proven to be treatable. So even if you're in a bad place mentally and something bad happens and then you're in a worse place mentally, post-traumatic stress is treatable. Until you do something that removes you from your assignment, or God forbid you take your own life, it is treatable. So regardless of what you're struggling with, regardless of what challenges you're facing, insomnia, whatever it is, it's treatable. So go get the help you need. Look for somebody who specializes in EMDR treatments, very effective for trauma. But don't give up, just keep trying. And, you will have highs and lows in this career. It's not always going to be a good day. Someday it's going to be a very bad day to be a cop. Might turn into a bad week, might turn into a bad month, might put you in a slump. Don't give up. There are resources available. Contact the Tulsa Police Department, First Responder Support Services, Mighty Oaks, loads and loads of people out there that are more than willing to bend over backwards to get you and your buddies the help that you need. So there are going to be highs and lows. Trauma is treatable, and don't give up. So that's it.
Fantastic. I think that was a question I was going to ask. Justin Miller, he introduced me to the idea of post-traumatic stress injury versus disorder.
Yeah.
It's your leg's broken. Let's get you healed.
Absolutely.
And so I think that is the point that we need to consistently make is that it's okay to say, hey, I'm struggling today. It's okay to say, hey, boss, I need a day off. That was too much for me. Boss, you need to be listening and saying, hey, that was too much for you. I see that you've got kids and I know you just took that call. Let's just have you go talk with somebody.
Yeah.
And so it starts with the leadership level of encouraging, even down to the leaders saying, hey guys, that call was tough for me. Here's what I did about it, and being open and vulnerable. The word weakness doesn't exist. I was educated on that the other day. Mental health is not a weakness. Mental health is just a thing. You either have good health or bad health. It's saying I got good blood pressure, bad blood pressure, and we're going to do something about it. And so I appreciate your time. If you're listening, again, we'll continue to grow our resources on projecttribute.com. Again, nonprofit 501c3, and we're dedicated to first responders. Anything we do it has the mission to save a life. From our podcast, even down to our challenge coins, we're doing everything we can to save lives for our communities that we serve, as well as our first responders. If you're interested, we've got lots of partners and friends that we continue to grow. Tulsa PD, if you're a small community around them, we can help connect you guys with some resources to learn and get your peer-to-peer support group going. But it's all about communicating and saying, hey, that was tough and I need to talk about it. All righty. Well, with that, I thank you. We're at an hour. I appreciate you taking the time and educating me. I feel like this is going to continue to grow, and I'm just excited to learn more and more from you and your department. And just building the tool bag that we have that we can start handing off to other smaller departments around us, and then hopefully grow that across the United States. So thank you again for your time, and thank you to the Tulsa Police Department for allowing us to have, to have the support and to really continue this dialogue around mental health.
Yeah,
so I appreciate you, John.
Thanks for your support and everything you and the tribute there are doing for our first responders. We appreciate you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. This podcast is hosted by the Project Tribute Foundation. We are a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to aiding our first responders. Thank you for listening. For more information on our efforts, check us out at www.projecttribute.com. If you're a first responder that would like to share your story, contact us at projecttributefoundation@gmail.com. You can find us on various social media and podcast sites by searching the Project Tribute Foundation. 100% of donations are used to save lives, while our retail store pays for any of our operational costs. Thank you again, and please be sure to like us, follow us, and share our foundation with your friends. Thank you and have a great day.